Hello, everybody. Welcome to Instrumental Breakthroughs Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Shankin, also known as Sita Ramdas. So happy you're here and welcome. Welcome on this bright, early Monday morning. We'd also like to thank Deadhead Land for hosting us, allowing us to be here, and Livestream Remote, who's doing our tech side. Our guest today, you might know as the founder of Deadhead Land, as your friend who streams all of the live music to you all around the world so that you can enjoy looking up Phil's nostrils as he drops bass bombs. Thank you for being here, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And wait, I'm having you having me. Well, however that works. I'm glad to be here.
Indeed. So usually, Brian, how it works, and you know how it works, but we're exploring the intersection between psychedelic use and creativity. And what we're curious about is sort of how our medicine journeys or even our recreational use might have inspired us to be the divine being of love and light that we see here before us.
Well, interesting. That's an interesting question. Well, first off, I think that there's like a kind of a natural drive for a lot of us to pursue expanded states of consciousness in whatever ways. And I think back to I was a little kid that used to notice things that would change my consciousness. I'd spin, and I know all kids do this, but I was like super aware of like I'm doing stuff. I'd spin around and really honestly know that if I spun in a certain way, I'd kind of get into like where I'd see things differently. And I even remember spontaneously, like kind of like I'd lie in funny positions and postures and stuff when I was like really little, and my parents or the adults around would say, "Oh, look, he's like a little Gandhi doing yoga." And and I didn't know what those were, but then that made me I was a very curious intellectual kid. Look up who's Gandhi, what's yoga. But I was aware that when I do certain things that it would shift how I would feel. That was, I mean, as simple as that. So I think it's kind of a natural pursuit. And psychedelics is, I guess once I got over the boogaboo, I was a really good little kid. I hate to admit it even, but I was like such a goody two shoes, and I believed everything that they told me, and drugs were bad, and everything was very delineated, good and bad, and anyways, I had kind of a big thing for me to get over. So initially, like when I saw the kids in school that would get high or do something like this, there was something like bad about it. So I would always pursue intellectual ideas to understand things. So I remember before I ever smoked pot, I read a lot about it. And it was the same way about psychedelics, and when I was a kid, back in the 1950s, no, not quite that long ago, but the 1970s, people weren't really in the late 70s doing psychedelics. Quaaludes were popular, getting not more conscious, but just getting fucked up. And that was the exact phrase that they would use. Like, let's get fucked up, dude. And I used to really like, it made me cringe. I don't want to get fucked up. I wasn't looking for that. So anyways, I pursued information about getting high, getting expanded, getting more. And so I would read a lot about psychedelics. And my friends around me were not doing those things. But anyways, it was curious. So like I say, that's kind of where it came from me. I think it's a very natural and curious instinct for people to do that. Did that answer your question? No, that only got us halfway there, huh?
It only got us halfway there, but I would like to note that, one, I think that that's very common. And I remember doing things like that as well. I used to particularly enjoy spinning around for whatever reason in the supermarket. I like the floors and the lights, perhaps. Maybe I was just bored.
Well, that could be it. I always responded to anything. I was as a kid, very tuned into a sensual world that I felt like I have to remember this. Like, it's almost like it's interesting because when you read certain spiritual philosophies or stuff, they say, oh, well, we were conscious and then we made a deal and we chose to incarnate into this reality and stuff. And that sounds nice. Maybe I don't remember that part of it, but what I do remember is as a young kid being very aware of like, I'm perceiving things right now really accurately in a way. I'm really tuned into things. and I'm aware that I'm going to lose this, and I need to remember as much of this as possible. Does that make sense?
That
I don't
makes
know.
perfect
Anyways,
sense.
that was kind of like I came in there as a kid. So I remember you were talking about lights and stuff. Like I remember like I would really dig on things that were like lights and mirrors and anything that would have kind of like an infinity display or something, because it would trigger some sort of so anyways, there was always a curiosity about that and about magical dimensions, about, like, even though Harry Potter wasn't a thing when we were kids, but that whole like, that whatever their train station was, number 19 and 3/4 or whatever, they had to like turn weird and suddenly it was there, the doorway. It was like I was always interested in possible alternate realities like that as a kid, even way before I ever did that. And then suddenly it's like, oh, here's something that might be a doorway to that. So there was a
Hmm.
fascination with that, certainly. um
Sure.
and that was before I liked the Grateful Dead, or before, I mean, musically I was kind of like a rock and roller, and then I got into punk rock. And Grateful Dead, I kind of knew who they were and knew who like the peripheral songs were. I knew Casey Jones,
Hmm.
because it was on the radio, and a couple others. But anyways, it wasn't my connection, but it was just this curiosity about what's actual magic and what's possible in our real world, for people to actually experience.
I'd
And
also like to note that I've never seen a Quaalude.
oh, really? Well,
Yeah. They don't
um,
seem to be around anymore. They seem to be as
no,
prevalent as adrenochrome.
I will tell you, and this is a side thing, but I've had people actually, for all the evil people out there who want to make money selling drugs for nefarious purposes and stuff, there's a drug people really liked that they actually somehow managed to actually squelch. There's no black market for it. There's no, and yet people really like it. I'm not saying myself, but I know people out there that would say, "Oh yeah, I would buy that." But it's a, it's a depressant. It's like drinking. What was fun, I remember taking one time and missing a concert because I just fell asleep, and it was like Madness and the Go-Go's at like the Roxy in Los Angeles, like
Mm.
1978 or something. And I just, passed out. I took a Quaalude and didn't make it off the couch. But that when you did manage to stay awake, it was like being drunk. And if you took one, it was like being moderately drunk, but you could handle it. And if you took two, then you don't remember what happened the next morning, and people would tell you scary stories. That never happened to me, but I
Mhm.
was on the having to take care of a friend that, oh my god, he took two or three of those. So it's not, it's fun in a stupid kind of way,
Sure.
and wasn't really a experience that appealed to me on a regular basis. you know
I just brought it up just because I so rarely hear them brought up.
well,
So
no, so well,
when did
it
psychedelics enter
was
the
actually,
picture?
that was more of a popular thing in my high school and early teen, or later teen years.
Right. When did psychedelics enter the picture?
Well, so I had been reading a bunch of books about it. I had read The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience by Ariel Masters and Gene Houston, that talked about all these people's psychedelic trips. And I had already, like, I was over 16. I was almost 17. I think I had actually left high school early just because I was bored out of my mind. I was doing different things. I was a student of pantomime. I went to mime school, actually, and the first rule of mime school is, so
Don't
I can't
talk about
talk
mime
about
school.
that. But I say that as a funny aside. A friend of mine that I happened to meet there at mime school, whose name I won't mention, but he uh, was familiar with these things. He knew about them. So I was suddenly like, oh my gosh, I've been reading about these, and none of my friends know about these kind of things. I'm curious.
Hmm.
And so, anyways, the magic thing was procured. We had just a great night where we just hung out, kind of. I guess his dad was out of town or whatever, so we had the house to ourselves, and we just did like cool stuff. We hung out, we swam, we got in the hot tub, we played frisbee. I think we tried to play hacky sack, but I couldn't really get it very good. We watched some TV, but it was all just like so it was like very mundane things, normal things that we did, but everything was just like so magical and so imbued with this deep thing. But I didn't have like this huge, the first time, revelatory experience. It was fun. It was extra fun. It made things more fun than they had ever been before, things that I'd done a million times before. So it was kind of that enhancedness of it. But it piqued my curiosity, and I continued. So yeah, in my teen years, I had like a few different times where I had experienced it and this and that, but it took I guess it took kind of a confluence of things for it to really gel and for me to make sense. But it seemed, let me put it this way, it seemed that the psychedelic experience was for me always like a positive one, but there was a bit of trouble perhaps aligning it with the um this was during the just say no Reagan years, you know, so the very, very strong. I mean, you did not, there was not even like marijuana jokes on TV at the time. There was like, once
Right.
again, in the early 80s, a very strong anti drug feeling in our community. And then it was all bad and it was all a gateway to everything. And, you know, and everything was the same, you know, whether it was smoking a joint or dropping acid or shooting heroin or, and crack was just being introduced to the world at the time, you know, or whatever it was, but it was all the same. And I guess I contacted the underground, you know, I was a bit of a punk rocker,
Right.
and then I also just through confluence of my weird experiences was also a bit of a connected to the hippie community. I wasn't really a hippie, but I worked for Jack Herer. You've heard of Jack Herer? Was the famous the hemperor, the famous
Well, I met
marijuana
him once.
activists. Well, Jack Hare, a huge influence on my life. And in the summer of 1980, right before I was about to turn 18, he was doing a marijuana legalization. I think we still called it marijuana. We weren't even really using the term. We were very much embracing the marijuana and the hippie culture. We weren't using the term cannabis or hemp that much. He hadn't written the book yet. He had not written the what's the name of his book? Hemp Can Save the World. Anyways, Jack Herer was at this event doing this cannabis like legalization rally. I went and just said, was like, I was 17, I guess. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna stay here and petition with these whatever. Anyways, this was at the federal building in Westwood, and I ended up camping out for 2 weeks, and that was like my first real like hippie community experience. So that's where it really gelled for me there, and that was the first time I had a mushroom experience, which was very different and more organic. And in fact, I remember like eating them and forgetting that I had eaten them, and then was like staring at the side of the building and thinking, wow, I said aloud, wow, it's cool. They're showing cartoons on the building there. And my friends all started laughing really hard. And it took me a while to figure out that not everybody was seeing the cartoons. Anyways, and that was perhaps one of my only like actual like outright like hallucinations, I think, where I like perceived something. Because for me on psychedelics, I've always been really clear and I've understood things. And even if there's visual distortion, it's never been about I'm seeing something that's not there. But it's always been more about like, no, I'm kind of clarifying what I am experiencing it and seeing it on a higher level there. But what gelled for me there was the community experience, and that was doing it with other people, doing it with other people, perhaps with a purpose or mission, because we were all there working for the what was it, the California Marijuana Initiative 1980. And, you know, we gathered like 300,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. And of course, they threw out a bunch of signatures and didn't get on the ballot that year. But it was a huge event. But what's interesting there is I connected with a bunch of deadheads at the time, but I didn't realize they were deadheads. I didn't realize that that was also a part of the kind of the communal connection there. So for me, it was like, that's where I was like, there's something about the psychedelic community that is like kind of brings people together and kind of connects them, and the inspiration, I guess, that you that people were feeling can be kind of focused. If that makes sense, kind of be utilized. So to me, that's where it becomes like fascinating, uh, as a just as a social force, you
Mhm.
know, and also seeing at the time that it wasn't like a really popular thing at the time in the early 80s, and seeing how over the 80s into the 90s into the 2000s and now to where it's now, it's something people talk about openly. It's published in just about every news publication, even though it's still against the law for the most part everywhere. There's research being done. So times have certainly changed, and it's a way different thing. Even the fact that people are willing to, myself included, to come onto a show like this and talk a little bit more publicly about these things and the positive influence. So for me, that's kind of where it became like, this is a good thing, and this is something that and I'm not saying that everybody should do it, but I saw it as a unifying force in the community. And I also saw there was a period of time post Jerry, probably I would say, 2002, 2003, where I noticed a huge drop off in psychedelic usage in the post Jerry Grateful Dead community, which that's something is Deadhead Land since I've been doing it. That's kind of what I really feel my scene, the scene I've covered a lot is the post Jerry Dead scene. Even though I've been seeing the Dead since '82, kind of the post Jerry Dead scene is a lot of what, because I've never stopped going to shows. I never stopped being part of the community, but I did see the psychedelic usage drop off a lot as other more party drugs became more popular. There's always been alcohol, there's always been cocaine, there's always been other drugs there, but suddenly those became the drug of choice and the preferences. And it changed the energy of the scene a little bit. And I feel that I saw that both in my local scene when I was living in Southern California, and I'd be part of the community in the Cubensis scene, as well as in the greater Dead scene, which certainly has expanded now in the last, you know, since Fairly Well, you know, in the Dead and Company years and everything. It's kind of become this huge national phenomena again, you know, as big as it was back in the late '80s there. But anyways, that's part of how I view psychedelics is how it kind of affects the community and how that also affects society as a whole. And I do think that they can be a real healing medium for people. And I think it's kind of interesting, even during the current coronavirus pandemic and various stages of sheltering in place and stuff, there's been a few articles about people's psychedelic usage and during this time, and you know, so it's interesting. I think there's a lot of potential in so many ways, individually and societal, for it to be used. Anyways, now I've kind of rambled in a few different directions.
Oh, can I pick up a few of those threads and
Sure.
see
Yeah.
where we go? So you said, you know, the psychedelics are good for the community, and then that's good for society. But so you're a member of the community.
Mhm.
And so what I'm curious about is, and not only are you a member of the community, like you're an individual who is sort of supporting the culture and pushing the culture forward and contributing in a meaningful way. So
Mhm.
what I'm curious about is, how have psychedelics supported you and transformed you in a way that sort of motivated you to create, you actually created a community called Deadhead Land, which is thriving.
Mhm. It's funny in I mean, everything to me you can take anything, and it's the holographic universe, I guess. Everything is can be looked at as the starting point or a nexus point of everything else. So I could say as simply as the fact that I have a kind of wacky associative sense of humor as it is, and then when you know, add some psychedelics to the mix, it kind of expands. And the original idea that Deadhead Land came from was just a funny idea that we were cracking up on while we were really high at a Jerry Garcia show back in 1990, which we heard the story about Jerry going to Disneyland, and we made so I could say as simple as that. But I think that the community that I felt, and I felt when I started going to Dead shows and other things, rainbow gatherings as well, but the Grateful Dead seemed to be a real focus for a lot of it. I felt in a safe place where I could perhaps maybe go a little bit deeper with some of my experiences. So I actually had some pretty profound um, personal, pardon my burping from the coffee, personal healing experiences that actually would happen at shows where I'm like, okay, I'm in a safe space for 3 or 4 hours. You know, I got here to the show. I'm here. I know where my friends are. I'm a familiar face. Enough strangers know me and stuff that I'm safe. That I had a few experiences where I just went deep. You know, where I don't know how else to explain it, but otherwise, you know, I was on whatever variations of medicines I had chosen to take that day, but I just went with the experience completely. And maybe that's not something that would be easy for a lot of people to do in a crowd. In a traditional situation, most people tend to buffer really being present with the experience with some alcohol or with some other drugs or stuff to kind of buffer it. And I never really went for that. And I remember a few times where I just, sometimes with people and sometimes not, but it's just like, I just went with it. I was just completely with my breath and with the music, and sometimes it would be moving and sometimes it would be sitting, but I would go deep into the experience, and whatever it was that medicine was going to show me that time or teach me that time about me and my life. And it's different each time. So it's not, you can say a specific thing. Oh, it's going to tell you what your this or what your that is, but just I processed or went through the experiences that I had to in a great way. And somehow this is what was magical about the Grateful Dead. It would seem tied into the show or the set list or the experiences, including the interactions I had with people before and after. It would almost seem like I was getting free of karmic experiences and having dharmic experiences, to put it in like yogic terms. It's like everything just seemed like so original and fresh and authentic and on purpose, whatever it happened to be. So, and I'm not saying that it was strictly because of the psychedelics either, because I realize other people are having these experiences too. So I think within a communal experience like that, that it's not like everybody has to get high. I think though that a certain number of people being in a certain headspace, let's just put it that way, carries the group energy to another space. And that doesn't necessarily even mean that it has to be high on a substance, because I know you do yoga and stuff, and you can go to a meditation retreat where everybody's just doing whatever it is, whatever the chant or the practice or the thing that they're doing is, and there's an energy and it carries and other people walk in, they're like, I don't know what that was, but I felt something, So at the Grateful Dead, and it might have been just because there was like a critical mass. There was maybe 51% or 52% of the people who were somehow one way or the other in this altered state, and it carried everybody else along. And that's where other people said, I don't know what was going on there, but wow, So, and I think that's part of where it comes from, perhaps in the communal thing. Anyways, kind of tangented there again, but Daniel, back to you.
I'm just taking it all in. I might need a second to pick up the threads. So,
and it's interesting too, I should say, because I keep referencing the Grateful Dead because this is Deadhead Land and that's my touchstone. In the early 90s, I remember connecting with some friends of mine who, connections through connections, who they weren't Deadheads. And they were into the house music scene and what became all the various forms of EDM over the years. But this was like early on in the scene when they called it house music, and the parties were like, you got a flyer and you had to go to a certain point and exchange the flyer for a map or something. And it's like, it was all secret and underground, but it was a very psychedelic community as well. And I remember, in fact, I remember my friend saying, you should really get into this. It's a whole cool thing. And what I liked about it was his sense of coming from a place of community. And this was in the early days of the electronica music. And it just wasn't, I'm not saying I even hated the music. It just wasn't exactly my vibe at the time, so I didn't, I went to a few raves and stuff, but so I just want to say that it's inspired community in many ways all over the world. And I recognize that the Grateful Dead, is much as we think we're the absolute greatest thing since sliced bread, we're just like one facet of it, That's like a religion going, oh, we're the world's greatest religion. Like, we're the world's greatest thing for us, but we are just one facet of it. And I recognize that there's and a lot of psychedelic culture and community out there. Actually, sometimes they actually kind of roll it. Oh, great, here come the Deadheads, So I have friends within the community that they're like, yeah, a lot of times they're like, they're not really thrilled with it because Deadheads are we're a little too much into the party sometimes, and not so much into perhaps the going deeper experiences. The experiences that I was referring to that I had at Grateful Dead concerts perhaps were not necessarily what other people's experiences were, because I know if we're going to a concert, we're going there to party, but yet on so many levels, I know so many of us still, whatever that is for you, would get that deeper experience from. And I do remember going to Dead shows sometimes, and it would be kind of like walking through like an ashram or something. You'd be seeing people just sitting there in the middle of nowhere, just meditating or doing different behavior. Now it's not. Now it's,
well, I remember one time
we're raging harder than we raged before. Not now. That's what it was last year. Now it's like, oh, we're not raging at all. We miss raging.
Mhm.
but but there's a change. There used to be a bit more of a, and I don't want to say that it should be this way or that way or one way or the other, but a bit more of a spiritual, for lack of a better term, a spiritual component to the Deadhead community back in the 80s and the 90s when I first experienced it. Um, a bit more just consciousness and awareness. It's almost like now we're, people, we go through cycles, and I think a little bit we're a bit more into, or have been more into, a cycle of just kind of the raging and the partying and the not necessarily, not as much consciousness for my two bits. But perhaps people get that in other ways. Perhaps the fact that psychedelics are now being used or explored more in therapeutic purposes in other ways gives that other purpose. And maybe it's not as great as it is. Maybe it's not the greatest thing to always be tripping your face off at a show. I'm not saying to not do it. I'm not saying to do it. It's your choice, kids.
So, Deadhead Land
Hmm.
has, in a lot of ways, been centered around the happenings at Terrapin. Oh, right. Throw one of those in the mail for me, would you? I should be wearing them on the show from time to time. But so a lot of Deadhead Land has been centered around Terrapin and the happenings at
In
Terrapin.
recent years.
Yeah.
That's not the original purpose of an intent of the site,
Well, it
or
predates. Well,
what I do,
Terrapin
but it
predates.
has been it has since Terrapin's opened. I coincidentally, accidentally, it wasn't on purpose, but it worked out fine. If everybody wants to say divine intent or whatever, fine, I'll take it for this one. I ended up living in Marin right when Terrapin opened and restarting my life in a way, kind of right when that was going. But Deadhead Land had already been operating on social media. I think I had maybe 5 or 10,000 followers on Facebook and a few thousand on Twitter. I had been doing Deadhead Land as a social media thing for a while. Short history is the T-shirt was created in like the 90s, and then the social media thing started in 2009, and then so Terrapin, uh, just because Phil Lesh is there and it became such a core focus point for the local dead community, and they have free music there frequently, and I'm broke often, not always, but so I ended up being at Terrapin a lot. But just so you know, there's not strictly, it's not like it's the official Terrapin site or fan site, and I try to cover more than just that, but that has been a huge focus.
Right. So that's not what I'm not trying to accuse you
Yeah, I just like to
being
clarify. Yeah.
anything centric in any way. Um, what I'm curious about, what I do believe, is that you have a unique perspective on what's happening there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're involved in when there are things like Passover, you're sometimes at the head table. When there are shows, you're like right up front, like those guys. You're part of you're part of the rich community that is there. So what I'm asking you to do, because we're kind of riffing on the idea of community, and it's my sense that communities have cultures. You can't just, to throw the word community out there isn't enough, because the Republican National Convention has a community, right? And that has a different, perhaps, value system than the Grateful Dead community. And then even the subset of the Grateful Dead community that is Terrapin Crossroads. You see what I'm saying? So can you comment on like the culture of the community at Terrapin Crossroads and how you've seen it grow and change and evolve over time?
Well, interesting. And I will say this even just in terms of what I was saying, the cycles of psychedelic usage. When Terrapin first opened, it was just, hey, it was a place, and Phil Lesh of the Grateful Dead is playing there, and there were a bunch of concerts, and people were excited. But the community evolved, initially the first few weeks, because we'd see the same people there online and going to the show. Hey, I know you, I know you, I know you, and people that we may have known peripherally, we suddenly were seeing every day. Like some people I knew online, or I had met once or twice, and suddenly I'm seeing them every day, 4 or 5 days a week. So that's just, being around people is the natural way to build community there. But I did notice that when Terrapin first opened, and probably even the first couple years, that there was a lot more psychedelic usage. And it was still more this big eventy, we're going to a concert thing and we're going to blow it out, and we're going to do party a bit. And I noticed that that had an effect upon the vibe and the community. And in my perspective, I think it actually helped the community gel in a way. I think it caused a deeper bonding for a lot of people on some ways. And then because it is a bar and they are in the practice of doing that, and most people find that you can't, even if you really enjoy psychedelics, it does eventually wear thin. You can't actually use it as your go-to party drug 247 all the time. It's not the thing.
It's not
Maybe some
coffee.
people, but what?
It's not coffee.
It's not coffee, and it's not ganja, and it's not a beer. And if you treat it as such, and it'll eventually remind you that it's not. So, and I'm not saying, I know people who have done it 4 or 5 times in their life, and that's been amazing and whatever, and they still are very much connected to that experience and whatever, and they'll tell you that that's all they. And I know people that have done it 4 or 5 times last week, probably, not me. But interestingly enough, I have not really dabbled very much in this whole Corona time, even though I've been home alone and have had the time. It just has not been the time for me. And I think that that's one of the really key things for someone to know, is when is the time and when it's not for them. But I have noticed that as the Terrapin community developed over the years, that it did kind of shift a bit, because it's a bar and people that go there frequently, it's a bar, you tend to drink more, and it became less practical for people to do that. So I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just a thing. It's a flow I've noticed in communities. And when there's a lot of psychedelic use, there tends to be like, wow, this is the time. This is the time we'll remember. This is the time where things were really great. And then it passes, and people are like, I remember back then when things were good. Now it's different. Everybody's different. I don't talk to that person anymore. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, that's just the ebb and flow of communities. Any community I've been in, whether it's been from, my synagogue youth group when I was, 12 years old, to theater casts and crews I've been a member of, classroom groups I've been a part of. I was a teacher for many years, and I'd noticed groups of students coming together and coming apart. And I noticed that on Deadhead Land too. Since I've been being active online, I have groups of people that come together that are the intense core Deadhead Land fan group for a while. Hey, everybody. And then sometimes they go their different ways, and they're not always on Deadhead Land, and other ones come along, and then, oh, now this is the core group. And it's almost like I'm seeing different classes kind of move through. It's just part of the thing of community. But I do think that within those communities that I don't know, I think back to trying to always bring it back to the thing. I think those that are psychedelic communities, there's a little bit more. It's just why the Grateful Dead or any of this stuff is a little bit more than just the music or the band, that it takes us deeper into who we are as people. And then we bring more of that into what we do, into even our participation with it.
Right. So now I want you to do that. Right.
Okay.
I want you to go there. You said kind of the magic words. It takes us into ourselves and who we are.
Okay.
So now I want you to tell me what you discovered about who you are.
What have I discovered about who I am? Well, for me, a lot of what psychedelics first helped, I don't know. That's a really interesting. What have I discovered about who I am? Just helped me feel my authentic feelings. Helped me be present in my life. Perhaps maybe recapture that, what I talked about when I was a kid, when I thought like, I need to remember all this in detail. I need to, because I'm really experiencing it, to where I'm actually experiencing it. I'm present in my body. I think a lot of my early childhood experiences were about not being in my body. I loved watching TV. I loved watching movies. I loved reading. And these were all things taking me out of myself. And psychedelics, there was no getting away from looking at myself, I guess. And so, again, being with my feelings, being with things that may not be comfortable, being with things that felt great, being with like, hey, it feels good to just be me and just move and just express myself in a certain way. And movement became like a really big thing for me. And so I was someone who did not move my body a lot as a kid. I was not athletic. I was not sports minded. Like I said, I was the reader and movies and stuff like that. And video games weren't really a big thing yet, or else I probably would have been way into video games. We had Pong. My neighbors had Pong. But psychedelics and music both started to get me to move. And I remember actually having an experience at one of my early Grateful Dead concerts where I was dancing and having fun. I became aware of where my body didn't move, and I became aware I was stuck, and it brought me to a place I really wanted to explore that with my body. And eventually that led me, I became a massage therapist, and that was my business, and up for 25 years. I'm kind of on a hiatus right now, but aside from that, so it's like, well, what's that about for me? I don't know. It led me into a place of like exploring that, and it's like learning about how to heal myself, heal my physical pain, how that may have connected to emotional pain. Wanting to do that led me down a whole life path, which was a career and stuff as a healer and a body worker and as a teacher. So it kind of opened me up to gifts that I had, but through not direct things. It's not like, here's your gift, open the package, ta-da, but through exploring myself, it's like, I don't know. It was like following instincts and impulses, and the taking the psychedelics, suddenly it wasn't good enough to sit and watch the concert. My body wanted to move, and it just led me through exploration. Does that make sense? I don't know.
That does make sense. And so I love that, on one hand, we have Brian as the community organizer. And then on one hand, we have Brian the healer. And so these are both two really very interesting facets. And I'm kind of curious how perhaps you see Deadhead Land as a vehicle for healing.
Well, I hope that it's a community for people, and in that sense, it's a good thing. I interestingly enough, try to avoid the word healer, both as a descriptor and a title. And even healing. Just people project too much on that, because then they're like, "Oh, then damn, fix my cancer" or something. And it's like that's not necessarily what we're talking about. To me, like the healing journey is partially the journey of your life. Where is it that you need to go? And that includes some experiences that might create some uncomfortable feelings, and it might also lead to places where it's like, well, what can you do? What can you do to help others along the way? I guess kind of for me, a lot of my experiences, even though I don't profess myself as a Buddhist, kind of brought me to like an understanding of like the Buddha. It's like, oh man, I'm more aware of my pain. First off, psychedelics are not a way to hide your pain. You can't get away from your pain. Maybe if you're deadening them with alcohol and quaaludes and other things, but it's not a path away from your pain. You're going to feel what you're going to feel more intensely. Now, big places where you realize there's a crossroads here, and I have a choice, and I can focus on feeling this way and focus on feeling better, on healing. Maybe that's a way of healing, but sometimes you need to go into the darker spaces. And I did do work with a psychedelic therapist years ago, that back before it was something people talked about and people talk about. And one of his things was, no, we're going to go into the places that don't feel good. Like, so when you're at a Grateful Dead concert, most of the time you're going to say, oh, I'm going to do stuff that feels good. And that's a good thing. And you want to build those good, positive experiences. It's not like you want to be a bummer, but you want to be authentic also. And when feelings come up, have ways of dealing with them. In a psychedelic healing session, or perhaps in an old school, more traditional, if a shamanic ritual or something along those ways, it's not necessarily about like, hey, we're just going to do all this stuff to make us feel good all the time. And we are going to go into some darker spaces. And honestly, even with a Grateful Dead show, because anybody that's really listening and feeling the lyrics, you are going into darker spaces. It is an in and out, the light and the dark all the time. But some people
Hmm.
prefer a more superficial experience. But again, when you're going deeper with it, it's all there and available there at the Grateful Dead thing. But I remember one time with working with the shamanic healer, and just as a kick, he put on as the intro music. I had given him a copy of the Infrared Roses Grateful Dead CD, which was a mix of like drums and space and crowd sounds and parking lot sounds. And he actually put on, let me get a sip of water there. He put on, usually he would play very ambient background music for the session work that he would do. But as just to see what it would trigger, I guess, he put on the track from that CD that actually had some of the crowd sounds and the parking lot sounds and stuff. And I just started laughing. And he goes, well, how does this make you feel? And he goes, well, this is great. This makes me feel great. I'm anticipatory, like I'm going to a show and this and that. And then he realized, like, oh, that's not really the experience that we were going for with the kind of the deeper work that he was looking for. And usually what he would do, and he actually said, he goes, oh, that's not what we're going to do today. He goes, that sounds like fun, but that's not what we're doing today. And he'd be more just like, as an uncomfortable feeling would come up, whatever that happens to be for you. For me, it was feelings from my past, from my childhood, from my teenage years, some unresolved traumas, unresolved issues, things that I was carrying forward, um, uh, perhaps childhood strategies that I was trying to live through as an adult that weren't working for me based upon some of these past experiences. These feelings would come up. Rather than we go, like most of the time, we filter those out. We go, well, I'm not going to think about that right now. That's not what's going on right now. And we move forward in our day, which is very practical and necessary to do, on a daily basis. But no, when we're intentionally there for a healing session, he'd be like, well, no, let's just kind of breathe into this and breathe into those uncomfortable feelings and see what it comes up for. And that kind of gives you a window into going deeper. So just so like you can go really deep with psychedelics into having a whole heck of a lot of fun at a show or at a musical experience and going deep into ecstatic joy, you can also in a safe way go deep into like kind of like the really painful and really awkward spaces. And it's really about bringing things to light. What was that for? What and truthfully honoring your feelings back to whatever it was you said about me at the beginning is a vibrant and joyous, divine creation of the universe right here in your living room. Well, right there having that experience. If you had things that made you feel bad or made you feel less than any of that, that's what kind of is coming up that may need to be healed. And that psychedelics in that sense gives people a great opportunity, gave me a great opportunity to kind of bring some stuff out in a safe way. To kind of see what happens, see what that is in the light for myself, and then make, as my adult self, when you come down and you've kind of processed those feelings, make different choices as an adult. I mean, that's, part of it too. Do people need the psychedelics to have that experience? Maybe yes, maybe no. It seems that it makes it readily available. It seems that it makes the process a lot I don't know, easier for people. I don't know if I want to say easy because it's not an easy thing to do. It's kind of a very bold thing to do, very brave thing to do. But anyways, I may have tangented again, but I think it was interesting. So.
It is interesting. And I am, because, we're talking about our access to light and our access to joy, and then the things that obscure that. And, one of the nice things I think about taking psychedelics and dancing to amazing music is that sometimes we kind of circumvent the shadow stuff and get to go right into the joy, and then that strengthens it. I sort of feel like the joy itself is healing and probably maybe even like chips away at our crap from the back end.
Well, here's the thing, and this is true whether it's psychedelics or just saying affirmations or following a particular meditation teacher or whatever. And that's like, when is it okay to let go of something, and when are you doing a emotional or spiritual bypass? Like,
right.
when is it time to go into the shit, And then nobody wants to, and this is one of my issues with some healers and some practices, is when they just say, well, you are damaged, bottom line. And not to knock 12-step programs, because I know a lot of good friends of mine that have been greatly helped by 12-step programs, but that's one of the things with them is like, no, you are an alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever it is, that, and you have to be that forever, because you say that as an affirmation every time. And I'm not meaning to get into that, because like I say, I know those programs help the people that they help, but it's I've always had issue with that. It's like, we do want to get to a place where we're able to say, no, I am a wonderful divine being here, manifesting my own reality and being positive and loving and beaming light, and I'm a care bear and whatever it is, but
Mm-hmm.
but authentically, how can we be there authentically? And there is some of that takes place, that spiritual bypassing stuff with psychedelics, especially in the early stages and amongst younger people. And so I know, like Brian in 1991, if you see pictures of me, just this like beaming little creature of light going to Grateful Dead concerts and just thinking I found the way. And I mean, I'm almost like on a mission. I'm here to share it with everybody. And it's my get on the bus period, if you will. It's, you go through that period where you're just like your estimated profit period, and you're just like there being, but then life got difficult, and as it does for many people, and then I had to deal with my stuff, and some of that became illuminated in like anybody, you hit your 30s or whatever time in life, and you have to deal with some adult responsibilities and relationships that work and don't work, and whatever stuff comes up. And some of that was perhaps for me illuminated in a different way because I had done the psychedelics, but that's just like a natural thing. I think that's where a lot of people recognize, oh, I need to make different choices in my life. And most people probably stop doing a lot of psychedelics, and some people stop going to as many shows. I've been given the gift of eternal teenagehood because my adult relationships, for whatever reason, haven't worked out, and I don't have children. So I don't have to make choices for anyone other than myself and my inner child and my inner teenager. And sometimes I haven't made the best choices, but we're all doing the best we can with that process. But I see a lot of people kind of hit perhaps the same crossroads in lives, and they make, because they do have kids or responsibilities, or they might not, they might make some safe choices. Let me take this good, maybe not great job, maybe not dream job, but I'll take a career that kind of works because that's where I am in life. And that's also where people in their own cycle, they stop doing the psychedelics and the craziness and whatever, but it's like, oh, we'll still have a few beers and this and that, but it's more about, I want to deaden the pain at night and get some sleep because I got to go face the shit again tomorrow. So I've been not stuck in that reality, so perhaps I've had a lot more time to explore my own personal stuff, or my stuff in a different way, I guess, than people do who get on that particular treadmill. So
Right on.
yeah.
Yes, I get it.
As I'm talking to you, and now you have a kid.
And now I have a kid. Yeah. Which is really the most amazing thing that I never wanted to do.
That's I've heard that from people many times, and I've never been opposed to the idea of children. They just didn't happen in my life. I did recently get a new cat who's here somewhere.
I mean, I can't imagine anybody would want a kid if it wasn't my particular kid.
Well, that's a great way to think about your kid, and good to,
So I know you have
good to like your kid that much.
I know you have to go soon, and I want to maybe give ourselves a little shout out for next week, because next week we're not doing a Monday morning, we're doing a Thursday day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're doing we're working on this conference called the Psilocybin Summit, where we're going to be talking to 50 or so experts in the field of psilocybin, sacred mushroom ceremony, therapy, research, and the like. And it's a 4-day conference, and Thursday, much of it is going to be streamed on Deadhead Land,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, well, it's very cool. Well, we did this, or I know that you put this together. I'm just here as kind of the media channel, but I know you did this last year, and we had a little uh, talk about it, did a little interview with you, and
Mm-hmm.
then I watched several of the segments, and it's just really fascinating. And again, I've been kind of rambling about my different experiences here, there, and everywhere, but these are people that have actually studied the subject in a very scholarly way, that have some very well thought out, very good information to share,
Mm-hmm.
and that are actually out there doing the work. It's not just theoretical. It's not just like and me talking about some experience I had 40 years ago. So it's really exciting, and happy to help this along by it being part of the programming on Deadhead Land. So
Right. And
and
if
that's
people,
Thursday the 17th. Is that the date, or what are the dates?
yeah, it's the 17th to the 20th. If people want to get a discount on the full tickets, they can go to psilocybinsummit.com/DHL
Okay, so
and get,
psilocybinsummit.com, and we'll post the links and everything. And so we're going to have some of the programming there as a preview and a free sample there on Thursday the 17th. We'll be sharing some of the programming. And then I'm going to be actually hosting a panel. And that's on Friday, though, the one I'm doing?
yeah, you're hosting Friday. You're doing Joe Moore from Psychedelics Today and Tara Lee Weathers. Do you know Tara Lee?
I do not.
She is sort of like a wellness coach for people who like jam bands. You know, her
Awesome.
web, she's a rock and life coach.
Awesome. Well, very
And
cool.
yeah, and they're going to be talking, their talk is called Beyond Harm Reduction. You know, maximizing happiness, joy, and healing with live music.
Well, that sounds like that's right up my alley.
Yes.
Yes.
And yeah, there's a couple. I think there's one other maybe. Well, Julian Vane is actually he's a British guy, and he's sort of like an occultist. He's kind of like a druid, and he is doing a talk called, you know, psychedelic ceremonies for healing and fun.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's some druid dude piercing the veil.
What's that?
Some druid dude piercing the veil.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Brilliant, brilliant guy. I mean, yeah, everybody here is pretty brilliant. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's sort of Grateful Dead. Well, what we're trying to do, don't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Between you and me, we might, on Thursday night, we might be hosting the Ace of Cups CD release party.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that would be pretty exciting.
Well, very good. Very
About
good.
the latency issues to Hawaii.
Uh-huh. Oh, well, in terms of them are they doing live performance, or?
We'd kind of like to see if something resembling
You're
that
all in
could
different
happen.
places, though.
Yeah, they're all in different places.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So, well,
nobody tell Rachel I said this.
Let's not talk about that on the air, perhaps specifically, but I'd certainly, I'm a huge fan of the Ace of Cups,
Mm-hmm.
and would love to help support that. But back to this thing that we can talk about, which is the Psilocybin Summit. So that'll be Thursday, the 17th, here on Deadhead Land. And do you know which speakers we have scheduled for Thursday?
Thursday, well, I'm going to open up with Danielle from the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, and we're just going to do an opening talk. Then a guy named Alan Davis, Dr. Alan Davis from Johns Hopkins University, is going to be presenting some research. He has a foundation called the Source Research Foundation, where they fund psychedelic research for undergrads, graduate students. And so a couple of his grant recipients will also be talking about their research. So we're going to just ease into it with research. Then we're going to talk to Simon Ugler, who is a therapist who's very much into archetypes and Jungian psychology and things like that. And he's going to be talking about psilocybin and the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a guy named Tom Lane who wrote a book called Sacred Mushroom Rituals of Pre-Columbia. And so he's very much into like indigenous use and like ancient use. And so he's presenting. Then Omolewa, who is the entheogenic midwife, is going to be talking about kind of like processing emotions and interrelational stuff, forgiveness and integrity and things of that nature. She's amazing medicine woman who works out of Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And after that is Kyle Bueller from Psychedelics Today and Dr. Ido Cohen. And they're going to be talking about the shadow side of psilocybin. They're going to be talking about not just the, the shadow that we encounter in therapy, even though they're both therapists. They're also going to be talking about sort of the shadow side of like capitalism and abuses of power and like all of the stuff that's happening as, all of the new policy things are happening. There's like the landscape is becoming much, much more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And then after those guys, we have Kane Barlow, Dr. Kane Barlow. He's from Australia, and he's going to be doing a presentation on psychedelic mushroom species of Australia.
Ah, very good.
Because we don't know anything about that, and we want to.
Right? He's like a fun guy from Australia.
Yeah, he is indeed. And then
closing make that joke so many times during the summit. So well, very cool. So this stuff will all be available for people for free on Deadhead Land on Thursday the 17th?
Yes. Oh, and not to be missed, closing out, our headliner is Mama Ayana Eye. And her husband, Kalindi, was a great teacher. Martial arts, meditation, spirituality, and high-dose mushroom use. So him and his crew are doing things like 20, 30, 40 gram mushroom trips. And talking to and straight up having intergalactic battles.
The macro dose. Well, yeah, because macros. Suddenly you're in the Robotech universe, and
and so she is an amazing teacher in her own right. Kalindi died earlier this year, and so that's very, very sad. And I just kind of wanted to put her front and center. I think what she has to say is like really, really important.
So what time are we talking? We're talking that's like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's an all day seminar.
Yeah. Mama Ayana goes on at 6 p.m. What's that?
So that's through the weekend.
Yes.
Correct. Each day. So the first day we're going to have here on Deadhead Land, and then the rest, if you psilocybin, again, it's psilocybin.
Summit.com.
Summit.com. I want to make sure I got that right. psilocybinsummit.com. We should have that on the screen somewhere. /DHL, and you'll get the special Deadhead Land tickets. And
I'm gonna in the chat. I'm gonna post. So Facebook is funny about things, so you have to post sort of this special link, or it gets confused.
Okay, so go ahead and post that in the chat, and we'll also we'll post that on the page and on the website. Make sure that's available to everybody. So I wanted to let people know that this was an online summit last year. So he's not doing this online because it's the current way of things. This is what they did last year as well. And so the idea is that, like any kind of conference you go to, is that you go to the conference and you can pick and choose which of these things you're going to participate in and watch, and then of course if they don't see everything once they've joined the conference, the replays are available after the fact, correct?
Yes. Yeah, there's people can have access to live only or lifetime access.
Right. Okay. So there's a few different choices there when you do sign up for this conference. And if this is a subject that interests you, these are really some of the top experts, and some you've heard of and some you may not have. And I think you're going to find it very illuminating and very enlightening indeed. So happy to be able to be part of that here on Deadhead Land as well. So not just live music here. It's one of the things that I really want to be able to do here, is to facilitate more for a deeper experience for the community, and that includes shows such as this. So so thank you, Daniel. Now I feel like, it's your show and I'm taking over for a minute, but thank you, Daniel, for putting this together. Both this show, the Instrumental Breakthroughs, has been a great show. This is, how many episodes have you done now? Like 20 or so, or
ish?
20-ish. I'm episode 20-ish, and
and we're taking 2 weeks off for the summit, and then we'll be back with I don't know, you told me you were going to get me Phil.
Yeah, no, I didn't say that. I have no access to Phil, but we'll see what's coming up. And as long as we've got everybody here listening, I didn't even really look to see if anybody's watching, which is funny because usually I do. Can I see who's watching? Is anybody out there? Hey, Deadhead Land. I feel like I've just been talking to Daniel and revealing my deepest personal secrets, and now, oh my gosh, all you people are out there. So just wanted to remind you that we have great musical programming coming up today with the David Gans Monday show at 3 p.m. and Scott Law solo chill at 4:20 and the Grateful News Hour at 6 p.m. So some great shows today. And then tomorrow as well. Monday and Tuesday really have been our best days. Tomorrow, Scott Chaslin at 1, Scott Guberman at 3, 4:20, Kendra and the Bunnies. So that's a big show. And I also going to do a little commercial. We're almost out. Deadheadland.com/shop. I only had a few of these for sale and we're almost sold out. Buy your stickers, all that stuff. All right, thanks.
And both of our Patreons.
And
Patreon for Deadheadland, Patreon for Tam Integration.
Yes, I'd like to thank all the supporters on our Patreon campaign here on Deadheadland. I've grown from I think it was like 15 supporters back in February to over 150 right now. And thank you for signing up and for supporting Deadheadland. And please do more of that and support the Patreon. Is it under Tam Integration or is it under Instrumental Breakthroughs?
It's under Tam Integration because we've got
Tam
a lot of Tam Integration has a lot of projects.
More than just this show. So support Tam Integration as well and buy stuff. And anyways, what else? Back to you, Daniel. It's your show. I'm taking over. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Well, you have to go to class.
You know, I do. And I realized then that it's Labor Day and that there's no class today, but I am really behind. I'm taking music classes. I have to practice my scales and get caught up. We're doing minor scales this week, so
right on. Well, do you have closing thoughts for our viewers?
Closing thoughts. I think that psychedelics have been a really good thing for our society, and that doesn't mean that you have to take them. And they're not for everybody. And but if they are for you, be safe with everything. Be conscious. Be aware. Be kind. And be grateful.
Beautiful. Be grateful, everybody. Thanks so much, Brian. Much love.